Disclaimer: in 2019 I was invited by the Panzermuseum Munster. Recently there have been reports and footage that indicate that the Russian armed forces sent T-62 tanks, a tank that entered service in 1962, so about 60 years ago, to Ukraine. As always, I'm a bit hesitant, since photos and videos showing a few tanks being transported on a train don't mean much, since that is not particularly uncommon. As such, some people claim that this is actually old footage from T-62s supposedly sent to Syria in 2018 or transported to a large-scale maneuver. And indeed, when I did a bit of digging, I found various photos from 2018 that had certain similarities to the tanks currently shown. So in this video we look at what we know and don't know, additionally why the T-62 could make sense, particularly in regard to availability and proximity. Finally, a look at the potential employment of the T-62s. Keep in mind the script was finished on 20th May 2022, so some information might be outdated in the future, yet there's a lot of general information included as well. The first clip showing T-62s being transported on trains is about 29 seconds long. I don't show it here since the copyright situation is unclear. The links are in the pinned comments if you haven't seen it already. On the video we see several T-62s, particularly the T-62M and the T-62MV. How do you know those are T-62s and not T-55s? Well, the T-62 has gaps before and after the second to last track wheel, as you can see here. In contrast, the very similar looking T-54s and T-55s have the gap after the first track wheel. Yet how do you identify what is a T-62M and a T-62MV? Well, the T-62M has the so-called brow armor. The knee Stali BDD applique armor was popularly known as brow armor, Browy, because the turret panels looked like a pair of eyebrows when fitted to the tank. The Glacis applique was an armored box, and inside were 6 layers of 5mm steel plates spaced 30mm apart, with the cavity between filled with pentapolyurethane. The turret panels were cast armor, 60mm on the outer side with similar layered interior. This protection was similar to that provided by the early versions of NATO Chopam armor, and this kit was similar to the Stillbrew upgrade for the Chieftain. So this was slightly before he got his famous hat. The other variant is the more modern T-62MV. It comes with Contact 1 explosive reactive armor blocks. For a more in-depth look on explosive reactive armor and why it does not necessarily explode, check out this video. Be aware there are several variants of the T-62MV as well, and not all of them have that much explosive reactive armor blocks. Yet those two variants of the T-62 were used in the 2018 maneuver Vostok as well. So the question is now, is this footage from 2022? Are these tanks headed to Ukraine? Some people claimed that some of the footage and photos are actually older, and from T-62s that were sent to Syria and or moved for a large-scale maneuver in the past. For instance, recent preparations for the Vostok 2018 exercise show Russian combat service support units training to restore T-60M tanks to active service from long-term storage. And indeed, when I started digging, I found various photos that showed T-62s that looked very similar. For instance, on Oryx blog, there's an article from 2020 with a photo of a similar looking T-62M with the same inscriptions on the side, like those on the railways. Of course, those inscriptions and symbol could be generic and nothing special, so I asked around, namely Peter from Tank Archives and Stanimir Dobrev. Again, sadly, I could not find where the copyright situation is clear that shows those inscriptions. See the pinned comment for links. So here's a simple reproduction of those inscriptions and symbols. There is something I can't pronounce, literally meaning don't lower from hill. Likely this means don't use neutral and drive downhill. According to someone else, don't go downhill is an indication of hazardous cargo. The cross, which sometimes also shows the letters, indicates center of mass, which is something I can't pronounce in Russian, so the first two letters. Now about the H2200, this is actually N2200, since the Cyrillic N looks like the Latin H. And it's simply a freight code for military cargo. In short, the text and everything is just generic. This means two things. First, the similarity to the photos from 2018 does not mean anything, unless we have two really good images and can be certain the two tanks are painted exactly the same way. And second, it also does not help us identify time, location or anything else. So in short, we're back to square one. Yet when looking at the older photos and footage, one aspect became rather obvious. The quality in most cases, with a few exceptions like the T-62M that can be seen on oryx blocks, are far lower quality, particularly the videos. This is an indicator that the higher quality footage is more recent. Of course, it could be still from 2021 or 2020 and related to a maneuver or internal shipping in Russia. But we have more. According to the independent analysis Stanimir Dobrev, you can follow him on Twitter here, a contact of his verified the cargo with the Russian Railway Service database, and it confirmed that indeed T-62s were transported. The Russian Railway Service actually has a service that allows for about 23 rubles, which is less than 50 cents, to get information on particular shipments. Sadly, we could not use that service since we are outside of Russia and money transfers are a bit complicated. There are also some people that geolocated one of the transports as well. Finally, Andrew made an excellent point. He noted that the Telegram account that seems rather pro-Russian noted that the footage is not from 2018 and claims that the tanks ended up in the Donbas region. In short, it seems rather likely that the Russian armed forces are shipping or have shipped T-62s to Ukraine or at least near the front. Now the question is, what reason would there be for the Russians sending these tanks in the first place and not T-72s from storage? So let us look into this. The T-62 has been upgraded and modernized several times over its long career in the Soviet Union. More recently, Russia had modernized a handful of T-62s a few years back, but generally they were supposed to be scrapped a while ago. The last time there's a combat action was in the Russo-Georgian War in 2008, during which they were used by the 58th Combined Arms Army. According to some accounts, 60 to 75% of the 58th Army's tanks were T-62Ms and T-72B1s, with a smattering of upgraded T-72BAs. As the tanks of August and other accounts show, none of these could withstand Georgian anti-tank guided missiles. As such, according to Stanimir Dobrev, these T-62s could be readily available in stores of the 58th Army and in a much higher state of readiness over the T-72s in deep storage and closer. Since those tanks were on active duty until around 2009-2010 with the Southern Military District. He additionally points out that logistical considerations might also play a part and concludes. So there's indirect evidence to suggest there may be reasons for using these tanks versus others in stores, both due to readiness and proximity. Furthermore, some T-62s were used in large-scale maneuvers like Vostok 2018, as such these tanks should be in an operational stage as well. Although the T-62 might be more readily available and closer to the front, yet a major drawback is that the T-62 tank is very similar to the T-55 in terms of suspension and other parts. Or in other words, it is less compatible or mostly incompatible with more modern T-72s, T-80s and T-90s. Similarly, the T-62 uses a 150mm gun that is not used in other tanks, which use 125mm guns. It is also questionable how much ammo is in stock for these guns. So logistically speaking, likely it is less of a burden short term, but likely more of a burden long term. Of course, this is also dependent on how they will be employed. Speaking of employment, this brings us to the next point. Namely, what could be the potential employment of the T-62s. According to a post by the Ukraine's General Staff from 23rd May 2022 at 0600, the T-62s are used to create reserve battalion tactical groups. As such, some speculate that these tanks might not be used directly at the front lines, but as rear area units to control occupied territories and/or reserves in case of a counterattack. Tanks have a strong psychological effect, as Elric Searle points out. A tank can usually subdue a civilian disturbance very quickly. At the same time though, a main battle tank can cause damage very easily, whether this involves running over civilian cars or damaging bridges and roads. This of course is no given and depends on the level of local resistance and other factors in the occupied territories. Another potential use could be for convoy protection for logistical units, as done by US and British troops in Iraq. It could also be used in combat. Some might argue that it's completely outdated. This really depends on the situation. First, a tank is better than no tank. Second, if you have a choice between a BMP-1, a BTR-80 and a T-62, the T-62 is better in nearly every regard besides mobility and transport capacity. Third, a modernized T-62MV is in some cases similar to the combat power of an old T-72 like the T-72A or T-62AV, of which several were lost according to Oryx's blog. To summarize, it seems very likely that Russia has sent T-62s, particularly the T-62M and the T-62MV, to Ukraine. There are various indicators that support these claims. About the employment of the T-62s, it is hard to tell. They could be used away from the front lines, but although the tank is severely outdated, it still might be used in active frontline service. In terms of combat effectiveness, it is clearly on the lower end when it comes to tanks, but compared to infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers, it is clearly more combat effective in most scenarios. As so often, similar to the Leopard 1, the devil is in the details depending on how the tank is actually used and what opposition it is going up against. I hope you learned something new. Big thank you to Stanimir Dobrev, Jens Wehner and Peter from Tank Archives for helping out with translations, questions and remarks for this video. Be sure to follow them on Twitter. Thank you to Tobias for discussions about the combat capabilities. Thank you to Andrew for reviewing the script and providing additional remarks. Thank you to the Panzermuseum Munster for inviting me to Stahl auf der Heide in 2019. Special thanks to all my supporters for making trips to museums and military archives possible. As always, sources are listed in the description. Thank you for watching and see you next time.